The film adaptation of a computer game is quite a difficult task. But studios rarely turn down such an opportunity to make money. After all, it's an ideal situation for producers, when there is already some kind of computer game with an army of fans. It is logical to assume that if you take a successful video game as a basis for the plot, invite a successful director, write a fascinating script, invite Hollywood stars, and allocate millions of dollars for special effects, you can break the bank. That's almost what German studio Constantin Film Production thought when planning a screen version of Resident Evil. And looking back, we can say that they succeeded, though people usually try not to remember computer games in the movies, as there are very few successful examples. Today we would like to remember the rise and fall of this series of films. The first game hit the stores in 1996 and immediately became a big hit. Everyone loved the game, and in 1998 Capcom released a sequel that was also incredibly popular. They sold about 10 million copies of the first two parts. It was not silly to ignore many such fans, and the rights to the adaptation were purchased by one of the largest German film companies. Please subscribe to Cinemash for more videos like this one. Before we get too deep into today's theme, after a long search, the studio decided to give director Paul Anderson a chance. At the time, Anderson was in a critical position after two major flops: Event Horizon, with a budget of 70 million, and Soldier, with a budget of 60 million, failed miserably at the box office. But a German studio had seen a movie adaptation of Mortal Kombat that had hit the jackpot. They got excited and made an offer to Anderson. After playing Resident Evil, he did not immediately agree to the proposal and decided to work on the project. Computer game adaptations are often criticized for the fact that there is almost nothing left from the stories of the games. Specifically, in the case of Resident Evil, the studio Capcom insisted that the movie be as different as possible from the movie. It was supposed to be better for the average viewer, unfamiliar with the games. The film's budget was $30 million. At various stages of production, the film had a lot of actresses starring Jennifer Love Hewitt, Natasha Henstridge and Sarah Michelle Gellar. But Anderson chose Milla Jovovich, who, after the failure of Jeanne d'Arc, came at a crisis point in his career. At the worldwide box office, Resident Evil, with a budget of $33 million, earned $103 million. It is not a great success, especially if you remember that the film was also the cost of marketing. But good sales on DVD allowed the studio to finally agree to produce a sequel, and increase the budget by $12 million. Paul Anderson also wrote the script for the second film, and he was going to direct it, but the success of the first part brought him back to Hollywood for a while. Instead, Alexander Witt was called upon to direct the second part, his film directorial debut. If the first part was poorly received by American critics, the second film is destroyed by audiences and critics. It was the director who was criticized by absolutely everyone the most. Witt's career stopped after that, and he never returned to the director's chair. For Jovovich, this attitude of the critics has always been familiar, so she took it rather calmly. The actress actively criticized the film, and complained that there was a mess during the shooting and the script was constantly being rewritten. Most of all criticized the clothing of the main characters. Milla said that it was very hot, so the female characters were most comfortable in such clothes. Resident Evil: Apocalypse had already taken first place at the United States box office. With a budget of $45 million at the box office, the film earned $129 million, of which $51 million were brought to the American box office. The results satisfied the studio, especially with the figures from America, and it was decided to launch the third part. It was decided to change the director and appointed Russell Mulcahy, who had previously worked on Highlander, and the script for the third film was written again by Anderson. Mulcahy insisted that the scenes in the movie were shot during daylight hours. The studio was rumored to have also had to persuade Milla Jovovich to return to her role unhappy with the second film. The actress did not want to appear the new part of Resident Evil, and persuaded her to return to Paul Anderson, who worked on the script. The third film repeated the fate of the second part. It also criticized and rocketed to the top of the United States box office. The film grossed $147 million at the box office on a budget of $45 million, which was the best result for the franchise. All of this propelled the studio to a fourth film, and here, at last, Paul Anderson, who had been banished from Hollywood again after the failure of Death Race, returned. In 2009, Milla Jovovich and Paul Anderson finally got married, so the whole family was already working on a fourth film. Paul Anderson convinced the studio to increase the budget for Part 4. The main additional expense was the new shooting with the 3D effect cameras. All of this took the studio another $15 million. It is believed that the high-quality 3D in the fourth part of the picture increased the box office returns on the three previous pictures. In the first weekend at the United States box office, the fourth film took in $26 million, which is the best indicator of the entire franchise. And for the entire American box office, the film grossed $60 million, which is a record for the franchise. Overall, the film earned $300 million at the worldwide box office. The fifth film was ordered to shoot immediately, and its budget increased to $65 million. Anderson wanted to shoot 2 movies in a row, but the studio decided not to take the risk. The timing of the fifth film affected the quality of the picture. It hit the box office just 2 years after Part 4. Although its budget was slightly more at the box office, the picture took in $240 million. And here there was a problem. The film failed in America on a budget of $65 million. The American box office was only $42 million, which was the worst performance of the franchise. And then, for the fifth part, Milla Jovovich was awarded a Golden Raspberry. And the attitude to the picture was generally negative. Now, not only critics destroyed the film, but also ordinary viewers. The studio finally decided to shoot the sixth installment with a drastically reduced budget. Because of this, Paul Anderson decided to shoot the entire film with a handheld camera to save money. Plus, the studio announced that this part of Resident Evil would be the last one, and the franchise will leave for a reboot. Because of the pregnancy, Jovovich, filming had to be postponed for almost 2 years, and when the last part came out in December 2016, the film grossed $312 million, which is the best result in the history of the franchise. But things really don't look so good. The United States box office picture, with a budget of $40 million, was able to collect only $26 million, which is the worst indicator for the franchise, and $160 million brought to the Chinese box office. And because the Chinese market is very closed, Chinese distributors usually buy the rights for a paltry 20 to 25% of the final box office receipts. So we can conclude that the last part of the franchise paid for itself at best. The low ratings of the previous parts finally gave up on the continuation. And Milla Jovovich and Paul Anderson said in interviews that if an offer comes in, they will definitely take part in the new part of Resident Evil. In 2022, Netflix tried to revive Resident Evil as a mini-series, but judging by the ratings and comments from viewers, it did not work. And in the coming years, we should not expect a qualitative restart of the franchise.